the way it's going to be included in the layout and the build, and what kind of components you need and what kind of equipment you need, and how it relates to security and training. These are all huge issues, and you guys have worked in the sector. So let's say ladies first. The question is, Brianna, what kind of challenges, what kind of mistakes have you seen people make, especially early on? And how do we fix those, or better yet, how do we prevent those?
Sure. Thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Coming from a point of sale standpoint and a hardware kind of side of things, one of the biggest mistakes that we see people make, not only in the cannabis industry, but really in any industry, is not really going to the experts to get their technology. We see a lot of people just trying to get technology off of Amazon or eBay, whatever is cheapest and easiest. And then they miss out on a lot of points about which technology is needed for the many rules and regulations that are involved in the cannabis market. They aren't getting the correct, hookup for their software. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that we see people making. And Star tries to work very closely with all of the point of sale software players in that market to make sure that they have dedicated resources, such as value-added resellers like POSRG, or distributors such as BlueStar, that are not only educated on the products that they're buying, but the market. They have become experts in the cannabis market, which is so much different than a standard retail environment. So that's the biggest mistake that I've seen people make when trying to break into the cannabis dispensary market.
Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll add to that one of the things that happens when you chase price as a technology is you're going to come across consumer-based technology. You're going to come across technology that's manufacturers who are very opportunistic. So when the Christmas season comes along, they're going to move their platform, or they're going to move their core materials over to what's hottest for that time. If something upstream in the material world changes and becomes expensive, they're going to rip that out and go with what keeps their price low. And so what you end up with over the course of time is a mixed bag of assets. And so now you have various monitors, various printers, various computers that are all very different. And so that's a nightmare for an IT manager. And then what you also lose is that long support cycle. So when you're dealing with commercial B2B focused technology manufacturers, you're generally getting a minimum of 2 years, upwards of 5 years of support. And that support can be direct to the manufacturer. And so you never find yourself from an IT manager or a CEO, retail operator, having to dial a bunch of phone calls to figure out what's wrong with your system. That's sort of vetted on the way in, and you can operate your business and let the IT just slip into the background.
Wayne, you want to finish this out?
Well, that's one of the bad things about going last, because the people before you take all of the good stuff. But thank you for having me. And honestly, that's the reason, we had Brianna and Stephen on here to echo what both of them said. One of the biggest obstacles I see is that, a lot of these guys spend a fortune, growing the plant, processing the plant. And once they get to the dispensary, that's where they decide to cut corners. And, I've said it before, buying purpose-built equipment. I know, Stephen alluded to it, we're in the Christmas season, Black Friday. I see people, running out and going to Target and, different places and, just compiling things together. When, one, it's not purpose-built, it won't last and endure. And then the other thing is, you've made this investment in your organization. Why not invest in products that grow and can scale as your business does? Stephen brought up a great point, because when you buy consumer grade equipment, they're constantly changing it out. And then you do end up with a mix mash of product. And, the other thing too, I've been to dispensaries where, they have so many big displays trying to piece a point of sale system together until you lose engagement with your customers, because you've essentially erected a barricade between you and them. And so, one of the things I can say about both ELO and Star Micronics is they both produce, very good equipment, and it's aesthetically pleasing, which a lot of dispensary owners like, because they like to go for that, for lack of a better analogy, an Apple Store type feel. So thank you guys for taking all of the great points,
Well, sorry to put you in that position, but I'm always, just I guess to take a step back almost and do by way more of an introduction. But I'm always curious, and this goes to the point that we just talked about. A lot of people think about the cannabis industry and they focus on the word cannabis, and I like to focus on the word industry. And industry requires industrial level solutions in order to function. And you don't see, I don't know, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Pfizer buying stuff off of Amazon. And so sort of
well, we sure hope Pfizer's not doing that, especially now.
But to that point, I'm sure, none of you, I think, growing up thought, oh, I'm going to be, serving the cannabis industry. So I'm always curious to hear how you came to this point where you end up on the, on the Cannabis Community broadcast, talking about cannabis related stuff. Brianna, how'd you get here?
Yeah, so I remember it was when I kind of first started at Star Micronics back in 2015. I was working with a lot of the software companies integrating our product, and I noticed a little bit of a trend of cannabis point of sale. And at the time, I was a marketing associate, pretty low level, and thinking to myself, am I even allowed to promote this? And quickly we saw that it was going to be a huge industry for us. At the time, we were promoting our eco-friendly printer. It had the little leaf on it, and I think that was something that was attractive to the dispensaries. And once they got to know us better and realized that we weren't just making these eco-friendly printers with the little leaf on them, but we offered all these features, we kind of ran with it. So I tried to really push that industry. I saw how fast it was going to grow. It's still growing. So many more states are starting to legalize it. And then we even started expanding our product line to cater to these companies. So that's kind of how it started for me. It was very still taboo at the time, and it can still be in your marketing. We were very careful with what we wanted to promote on our website and how we wanted to word things at first. And I think now we're at the point where it's such a huge market for us. These are such loyal partners and customers of ours. We're willing to do whatever we can to make sure that they have the solutions they need.
Yeah. On my side, I came from two different angles. So the more personal angle actually happened. I was on a business trip. It was back in 2013. This is pre ELO, but Colorado was the lone state that was legal. And so I went into Colorado and I did what I did. I just meet people, and I met this one guy who was a grower in the cannabis space. And again, this all the terminology, all the jargon was very new. But listening to him and speaking to him, I could have been speaking to a food scientist from McDonald's. I could have been speaking to a Pfizer scientist. When he talked about yield rates and consistency of product across geographies and temperatures and all these effects on the product, it dawned on me when we talk about industrial 4.0, this was agriculture 4.0. And again, this was 7-8 years ago. And so it struck me right then, this is something I want to participate in. Whether my professional life leads me this way or not, I'm going to find a way to participate in this market, because it was very obvious just listening to this one person to be serious. And this was going to be industry, not just cannabis. And so just by chance, fast forward 2-3 years later, I start working at ELO. They assign me my territory, and it happens to include Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Canada. And oh, by the way, it also happens to include Idaho, Montana. So I was just thrown in front of the cannabis market by ELO, and they said, "Hey, here we go. You're in the states that are driving this adoption. You're in the states that are driving this industry, and we've got software partners that are starting to grow. We want to have some focus on that." And so that's how I came from two different divergent roles and ended up really focusing on this.
Duane, what about you?
Well, for me, it really began in 2001 with the release of the Chronic album by Dr. Dre. And that was, kind of a dream moment. And, no, being serious, for me, it started about 5 years ago. Our organization, they, reached out and wanted to know, where I saw opportunity for growth for our company in the retail space. And cannabis was one, to Stephen's point at the time, I think it was just, maybe Colorado and Maine. But, what I did was I put myself, or I started to think back to what it must have been like during Prohibition, and how, there was a time where alcohol was, treated the way cannabis has been. And, now none of us on here, most of us on here probably don't even remember a day where you couldn't just go into a store and purchase alcohol. And so, that's how I envision, for the cannabis industry. And then it became, how do you, help people? Because from my perspective, we can't sell directly to any of these medical or, adult use facilities. We can't, sell directly to them. So rather than continuously watch, people in this industry, an industry that I believe in, struggle and, pick the wrong, solutions, I said, how can I, help them? And, selfishly, it does, flow back because if they, utilize some of our resellers like POSRG, they purchase the hardware through us. But it's more of an educate and, try to grow this industry versus, let them try to figure it out on their own.
Thank you for that. And, Brianna just actually said something that triggered a thought in my head, because one of the things that we want to try to make sure we do is make sure this is relevant to sort of applicants who might be customers, and also to consumers. And a lot of consumers, I think, need to understand how this fits into their perspective. And so one of the things that consumers really care about, particularly cannabis consumers overall, is the environment and how, I think, and politicians in Illinois, there's going to be more and more sort of emphasis put on, environmental impact of the cannabis industry, because it's been huge. So, Brianna, you mentioned something about an echo printer with a leaf on it. And that was actually interesting to me. First of all, I don't assume it's a cannabis leaf, but be that as it may, can you talk about that? Because again, every applicant has to write an environmental sort of plan to address environmental considerations as part of the application process. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, this printer was manufactured long before I started my career at Star. So it kind of we evolved to the point where we didn't have to promote our eco-friendly printers anymore because they were just all eco-friendly. By this meaning, energy efficient, it'll, automatically shut off when not being used. We promote eco-friendly paper, recyclable receipt printer paper, try to reduce margins so that it's less paper being printed out. That's kind of where we stand on the eco-friendly standpoint. As far as other, areas where they're trying to, be more eco-friendly, maybe Stephen or Duane can speak a little bit more to that.
Well, if the question is, ELO's participation in being eco-friendly and how that can kind of be passed down as a value to a dispensary operator, perfectly frank and say it's not majorly on our radar as far as how we go to market or how we design products. But I would say that there is a green sort of offshoot of digitization, right? So the idea of reducing paper, and I don't want to step on the Star Micronics side of things, but wherever you can reduce paper, wherever you can use a screen to speak to your phone, use a screen to speak to another mobile device. That should reduce some of that footprint alone.
Yeah, and to pick up off of both, Brianna and Steven, when you look at most of the products that are manufactured now, especially from an energy consumption standpoint, they're, a lot better. I wouldn't say they're as, good as they will probably get, but they're a lot better than, what they used to be in terms of automatic shutoff and things like that. Some of the things that I've seen done that aren't necessarily under the guise of eco-friendliness, but it does work is, I'm now starting to see, more of a use of RFID technology in this space. And so, where that used to be something that was predominantly mandated, by metric, and then, a lot of the people, quite honestly, never used it for the RFID capabilities. I think some of the operational efficiencies that are being presented are now, having these guys to do that, because you can now, especially if you're in an organization that comprises of the manufacturing and grow and process and the dispensary, you can now track that product with one RFID tag, throughout seed to sale, essentially. And so what ends up happening is, there's a lot of labels and a lot of barcoding and a lot of tracking that goes on this. So you can, mitigate or minimize some of it, through the use of technology. And it works the same way, as Steven said, there's a lot of, delivery options. And so now, they're starting to use smart devices, mobile handheld computers and things like that to complete the transactions. And, hopefully we'll have a show, soon where we, talk about how, some dispensaries are now looking at, loyalty opportunities and digitization, so that, you go into the dispensary, show them your QR code, they give you applicable discounts. And then on some of them, they even have a electronic wallet solution where you're able to use a credit or a debit card through those means, so that you can complete the transaction, thus again, minimizing, some of the paper and things like that that's involved.
I'll add one comment real quick, Mark, and we'll get off of the ELO star thing here for a second. I think when you think about the grow side of things, and we talk about agricultural 4.0, you talk about RFID, camera vision, smart technology, you're going to see that back to that yield rate, right? How can I yield the most with the least amount of resources, with the least amount of water, maximizing space? And so there is going to be beacon technology, smart technology that is going to lend itself to that application more than the front of house. And there could be opportunities there where our technology makes sense for that. Our technology does have embedded cameras, so that could be sourcing information from your grow and getting that back to whatever the smart computer system is in the cloud that says reduce your water, increase your water, do this with the temperature, almost like a Nest system with a lot of that computer vision technology built in that's going to maximize yield. So I see a lot of green technology coming our way.
Yeah, to Steven's point, I mean, I'm seeing, and I'm being, contacted by a lot of IoT companies that have, sensors, be it, water, temperature, humidity, all of these things that can be utilized in the cannabis industry, not only, from an operational efficiency standpoint, but from not disturbing the plant, because, we do know that, the plant, once it reaches a certain, life cycle, then it does, interact with our body's pH. And so, it becomes to where, I don't want to say, like set it and forget it, but you can put those sensors out there and, you're able to monitor things remotely versus having someone continuously have to go in.
And just to make it a little more relevant to some of the people who are on right now that I know are like me, always thinking about what do we put to improve a cannabis license application. I just learned something. We should all be talking about the efficiency of the equipment we're using as part of our environmental impact statement, whether you're applying for a license or you're a company, an existing player. You need to make environmental consciousness part of your story. And just because, a lot of the equipment is become much more efficient over time does not make it any less important to state that in your application, because the reviewer may or may not know that. And so regardless, the fact that you're having a less impact on the environment ought to be a key point. But to bring it back to consumers a little bit, and I know we're going to have to break shortly for a giveaway, but to bring it back to consumers again a little bit, can you talk me through, like, when I walk into a dispensary, or when I'm shopping online or whatever I'm doing, how is this relevant to consumers? Like, how does what you guys are talking about and the products that you represent, how does that impact the consumer experience when I am trying to consume? Brianna?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little hard to see a direct consumer impact, but looking behind the scenes, our specialty is point of sale, but we do a lot more than that. We're enabling software companies that are developing online ordering and delivery applications for cannabis, much like you would order your food on Uber Eats. That's becoming huge. We see self-service once things get back to relatively normal, becoming pretty big in cannabis. Instead of waiting to be seen by a bud tender or waiting outside because, they have a lot of dispensaries have regulations on how many people can be in at once. Walk up to a kiosk, get to learn about, the different strands that they have, or, edibles versus flower versus vaping. And, you can pick out your products right then and there, order it, and then walk up and pay. It's hard to say where that direct impact is when a consumer obviously isn't walking into a dispensary and thinking about how am I going to check out. But we are always thinking about how to make the customer experience more simple and better, especially in a dispensary environment where aesthetic and the customer experience is very, very important.
Oh, Helen, you know what? I think you're way understating it. Again, I think you're way underplaying your own role, because I went to a dispensary recently, and then I went to a dispensary a week later, a different dispensary. And the amount of time with sort of the same, I was the only person in line, and the amount of time it took me to get out the door at one dispensary was markedly different than the amount of time to get me out the door of the other dispensary. So I think that is
killing me, Mark. I was going to bring that up.
that is critically important. To me, that's all the difference in what happens. And that, maybe that was me being sort of a technical, knowing a little bit more than others. But now in COVID, I'm standing there in my mask looking around thinking, shit, how quickly can I get out of here? And so it's become an incredible reality. What you guys do is relevant to my health in some ways. So I don't want to get all drama about it, but sorry, I just couldn't resist.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm based in New Jersey, so it just became legal. I don't really have that experience to go into a dispensary regularly. It's been a while since I could travel. But yeah, that's very interesting to hear from the consumer point. We're a B2B company, so it is kind of rare that we get to hear those perspectives, and it's interesting that it is making that much of an impact on consumers as well.
Even
Shawnee's got to do the giveaway. I know she's trying to slow us down here, but Mark,
yes, thank you, Stephen, for paying attention. I love it.
Always. I do want to come back to the
well, why don't we just have you finish your thoughts, and then we'll do the giveaway.
Yes.
We'll make it quick.
Fair enough. A couple of comments. Yes, self-service, self-order. If you think about cannabis, well, it's got some commonalities with alcohol. It's got some commonalities with food. It's consumption. It's personal. It's not necessarily something you always want to share your taste with the person who's going to bring it to you. So how can you have that private moment? And I think this becomes especially important with the new customer acquisition. A lot of the market today is former, black market buyers, and they know what they're looking for. They can look at a jar and tell you within 5 seconds the product they need. But we want the older generation. We want the on the fence generation, right? We want maybe those who are looking to psychologists and others to come off of that and come into this market. And so they need to have more point of education. And that's also part of that application process in some states is how are you educating the market? So just the same way in applying, you talk about what you're doing from a green and carbon footprint standpoint. They also want to know what are you doing to make sure the consumer understands what they're buying, because this is a controlled substance. It's not a cheeseburger, but they still want to have that type of experience that they've come to enjoy at the McDonald's and the Taco Bells of the world.
Love it. I love it.
Oh, okay. I thought Shani was getting ready to give away the gift. No, you're spot on, Mark. Time is money and time is revenue, for a lot of these owners and operators. And, Brianna brought up the point about, there being a limit to, in some states, the number of people who can be in the dispensary. So imagine, in talking to some of the dispensary owners, at least, when there was a good deal of tourism, they were saying how if there's to Stephen's point, if it's an existing customer, you're looking at maybe 5-10 minutes for the transaction. But if you get a tourist in who's never been in there, you're looking at 20 plus minutes. Meanwhile, you've got 90 minutes worth of people sitting out in the lobby. And so each barcode scan, each receipt print, each transaction, all of that matters, because a lot of the consumer grade product, doesn't have the RAM and, the capabilities. And even if they do, they're not meant to be powered on, for the length of time, that the more enterprise or business grade, equipment is. And so, I often see where dispensary owners will go out and purchase the cheapest scanner, that they can get. And, it works for a time. And what ends up happening is the bud tender or cannabis consultant, whatever you want to call them, over time, they drop it. And then they're trying to scan it. And, when you're looking at something that takes 7 to 10 times to scan versus, 1 or 2 times, each of those seconds adds up over the period of a day. So, I would say, in addition to, I think both of them have undersold the, aesthetics of their product, which, in a lot of the places, it really, makes them even look better. And, they're pretty much a sleek profile. So, that you are able to engage face to face with the customer versus having that barrier in front of them. So, I definitely think, making an investment in those is definitely worthwhile. All right, so let's give something away.
All right, so you guys are ready for me now? I can
Yes,
give
we are.
Okay, cool. So we are going to put the link in. We just had Krista ask if we could share the link of the bag that we're giving away. So what's different about this episode compared to the previous 2 episodes is that the medical cannabis community is giving away an Onsen Lab smell-proof bag. Okay, the rules were that you had to basically register to watch this episode. And then in addition to that, you have to actually be in attendance for the event, for the virtual event. So I'm going to show you guys a picture of what the bag looks like. And then I'm going to do a really quick Wheel of Fortune type thing. So you can see visually that I'm not picking the names myself. And I'm not going to be the one choosing. It was going to be a computer. So this is the bag. It's, like I said, from Onsen Labs. We're going to put the link in the chat box for you guys if you are interested. And then this is our Wheel of Fortune. Hopefully you guys can still see it. So if the person isn't here, we're going to move on to the next person.
I'm here.
Oh, very funny. Lisa Miller. Do we have a Lisa Miller? Can anyone tell me if there's a Lisa in the chat that has responded? Lisa, are you here?
Uh-oh.
I do not see a Lisa Miller.
Okay. We're going to remove Lisa. We're going to do another spin. Nate Morin. Do we have a Nate?
We have a Nate Moore, and congratulations, man. You are the winner of the day today.
Congratulations, Nate.
Send me a message after the show and we'll get that mailed out.
Awesome. And Mark, I'm just going to turn it back over to you guys.
Well, actually, let me ask you both again, because this is an interactive environment. What's going on chat? Because you guys know I can't multitask.
So, yeah.
Are there any questions or comments these guys should be getting?
So I'm watching Facebook. We haven't had too much going on Facebook yet. So I am watching Facebook, but we do have a question that I believe Stephen was already able to answer about agriculture and how we're kind of moving in a more environmentally friendly direction. But it does look like someone asked about open source software. So it looks like Michael said, are there any open source software solutions that any of you feel comfortable exploring within the realm of compliance issues? For instance, customer databases, inventory systems, etc. Given the cost of enterprise level B2B software, that feels like a huge barrier to entry for some.
I can certainly speak to that if you don't mind. So one of the things we've done to address, actually 2 points in there, one being around cost, right? So we've really embraced the mobile operating systems and really the big one being Android. And so Android, by its very nature, it is an open source platform, or at least it's a platform you can develop to. It's a platform that has a very large developer base. So compared to like an iOS developer community, you can certainly get to a finished product at the right price point. There are also tons of security features that are native to Android. But then once you introduce the ELO cloud feature as well, now you really have a full secure link. And just so you know, these Android POS systems that I'm referring to are in tens of thousands of locations, doing millions of credit card transactions with tons of personal data. So that has been addressed, and that is an open source platform natively. And it also allows you to interact with, if you have a different couponing system that isn't native to your POS, you have a different loyalty system that's not native to your POS, through a microservices architecture, you can create a cloud environment where you're pulling from those. And now you have the flexibility to design how you want. And oh, by the way, generally speaking, the hardware and the chipsets that are required to run these commercial flavors of Android are also lower cost compared to what you've probably seen in the Wintel market. So that's sort of how you mitigate both cost from a B2B perspective and compliance and security. I will say, though, 2 comments on cost. One, yes, open source is great. You can go get a Fiverr developer and maybe they can build something for you. But you're going to find that there's a proliferation of ISVs in the market now that build on Android. And the great thing about BlueStar, Star, and ELO is we've vetted out a lot of those. And so we can bring the more cost-sensitive options to you without you having to sacrifice on quality or security. But I'll also say you can't be afraid to spend. It doesn't matter which market you're getting into. If you're going into brick and mortar retail, it's a capital intensive market. It's something when you talk about ROC metrics, you've got to be in it for the long haul. Which really, and I'll stop speaking here in a minute, but that really lends itself well to someone else's comment I saw come through. And they said, in Urbana, Illinois, I'm afraid to walk into my local dispensary. And so I'm going to tell you what, the last 5 years have been get rich schemers. Some have come, some have gone. There's been the right kind of contraction through mergers and acquisitions of those who set up their business the right way. And there's been the other contraction, especially like in California, where they didn't set up their business the right way and they collapsed under either regulations or just poor customer experience. So if you're going into brick and mortar and you're going into retail and you want to be there in 5 years for the big $1 billion acquisition, you got to spend those couple hundred of extra dollars along the way to ensure that you're viewed by both the potential acquirer and, of course, the customer as being a safe, secure place to go shopping. And that shouldn't be any different whether you're selling cannabis or gold watches, quite frankly.
So how do you guys take something, and I'm really interested in what Stephen was just talking about. And the question is, how do you take a product and then evolve it for the cannabis market? Like, does what we use in this industry greatly differ from other industries? What are the features that we need for compliance, and is it sort of similar to compliance in other industries? So I guess the real question is, how does the technology transfer one-to-one to other industries, or have you guys had to sort of do something special to drill down and serve this industry? Brianna?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of answer that question on two levels. It's kind of a yes and no answer. I mean, when you look at it, cannabis has a lot of additional regulations that needs to be followed that just honestly kind of requires more equipment, more hardware, label printers, scales, everything that you would need to be compliant. Some retailers use all of this hardware as well. However, it's a lot easier to go, well, I guess the word could be easier, to go into a cannabis ISB and say, you not only need a receipt printer and a cash drawer, but you need a scale if you guys are doing, pay by weight. You need label printers. You need, all of these extra accessories. You need barcode scanners. Whereas a retailer, an SMB retailer, might be able to get away with less equipment. However, it really just kind of depends on what the offering is. We see people outside the cannabis industry placing the same exact orders that someone in the cannabis industry would be at times. It's just a difference of whether, you're buying it as a nice to have or a must have. And for cannabis, it's a must have.
I'll just add, and I'm going to go back to the kind of the Android thing, right? Take advantage of the fact that you're building your retail experience from the ground up. That's a unique thing that these 100-year retailers don't have. So every time a 100-year retailer tries to innovate, they have to think, well, I have a substitution cost. I have to tear down to build up. You've got the luxury of just building up. And so if you build up on mobile architecture, for instance, such as Android, one of the benefits you're going to have is to be able to flexibly pivot when those regulations change, right? So you have this labeling requirement today that's XYZ, a new law comes down and now it's ABC. And so how can you pivot very quickly? Well, if you have this mobile-based architecture on this very well-fixed commercial hardware, then the software, again, kind of how I said earlier, falls into the background. You can quickly pull an app into the environment, and now you've pivoted. It speaks over Bluetooth to the printer. And so this idea of using what consumers have become comfortable with in their technology, but then commercializing it and making it software ready for the commercial market is really how you're going to address a lot of that.
Yeah, from my perspective, I view cannabis as retail. The only difference is that there's a lot more regulations, a lot more compliance, and a lot more ways to lose your business, in this industry by not keeping up with those requirements versus a traditional retailer. And then one of the things that it does upset me is that you add all of these additional requirements and constraints on them in an industry where these guys don't have access to capital and loans and things like that a traditional retailer would. So a traditional retailer has the luxury of being able to get a loan, and if things don't go well or something like that, they can go out and get another loan and mitigate those mistakes. And that's part of what's really driven me to help everyone is to make the right purchase the first time, because those of you in this industry, most don't have the luxury of making many mistakes without it impacting your revenue or your compliance in a significant way. And so, sure, you could probably go out and buy one of the consumer grade printers and get them, to work for a while, a time or two, and maybe even do some labeling. But over the long haul, you're going to, buy so many of them because they're just not meant to be in this environment. They're not meant to be around pollen, not meant to be, around, everything that comprises in this industry. And so you end up just going through printers. And I've seen, processors that had piles of consumer grade printers sitting in the corner because, they would last, maybe a month before they chewed through them. And so, I think that's where, I'm not going to call it cheap because, whether something's cheap or expensive is all relative, to that individual. But that's where, making a decision, based off of frugality can come back to hurt you. So, all of us are on here to, try to help, and say, and invest in, in ELO, invest in Star Micronics, invest in Zebra. Because with the warranties and the service contracts and things like that, those are going to last. Stephen said it earlier. You're going to get something that can last 3 to 5 years, maybe even longer. Versus something that's only going to last you, months or a year.
So, talk to me about labels. I think labels in general are. And even just speaking as a consumer, labels in general are sort of a banes of one's existence. I found myself really straining my eyes trying to read the microscopic print on a product label from a dispensary. It occurred to me that I would really be hard pressed. I had to granted, I just turned 50 this year, but I had to go find reading glasses. And even then it wasn't particularly easy because all the writing was sort of smudged together, the ink was coming together too closely on the tiny print, so it was hard to tell what was written. And I was just looking for just different CBD percentages because of a different question I got. So what are your thoughts about printers and what should go on a label reasonably? What can go on a label reasonably? Excuse me. And what's too much? And I ask this from a couple of different perspectives, or maybe a few different perspectives. One, I'm a lobbyist, so I work with state officials, and a lot of what goes on a label is actually required in law. In Illinois, we're going to have to figure out how to do a label in English and Spanish, probably. So we're talking maybe like an accordion label or something like that. So, Brianna, what do you think about labels? What can you tell consumers, and how can you advise retailers and state officials to make labeling actually something that a consumer can use?
Sure. I will say, labeling isn't exactly our expertise. We're more focused on, the point of sale. While we do offer pre-printed labels for cannabis markets and label printing solutions, I think Duane could probably answer this question better than I can. So I'm going to defer to him on that.
Yeah. Okay. So from a label perspective, I think, what you have to have on there is whatever the state requires. But I am seeing where, more and more, growers, well, let's take a step back. Consumers and other areas that have matured, so to speak, if you can really say that, their buying patterns are different, versus when it first started and people would just go in and say, let me get an eighth of sour D's or something like that. I'm seeing where more and more of the consumers are actually gravitating towards certain growers. And so from that perspective, it kind of reminds me of like the craft, beer, where you've got Great Lakes Brewing and Untitled Art and, places like that where, people know that they have a quality product and that's what they're going to. And so as such, people in the industry are starting to see that. And so QR coding, I'm starting to see that on there more and more because a label just can't capture everything, so some of them are actually starting to integrate QR codes in there to where, you can click on it with your phone and you can pull up all kinds of information, find out, the different strains that created that hybrid, what the percentage of THC, THCA, CBD, where it was grown, that sort of thing. And so, I think whoever said, I think that was you, Mark, where you said the labels are small and sometimes they're smudgy. a lot of that is based upon the printer and the quality of the labels themselves. And so, if you have a quality printer and quality label, you shouldn't see as much of the smudging. But, to anyone out there who may be, looking to get a new dispensary, if your consumers are feeling that, imagine what your employees are going to feel when you guys have to do inventory and inventory management and things like that, because I've talked to dispensary owners who said, looking at those labels, they'll have a team of four to six people, 6 to 8 hours doing the inventory. And so, we talked about it on the previous episode of how RFID is helping with those solutions. So I, tell people, if your customers are having that experience, your employees are going to have that experience when you're doing the inventory, and there are ways to mitigate that.
All I'll add on this topic, Mark, is that the label can become an experience touch point, actually. So you talk about the QR codes, this idea of scanning the code, and then yes, it's going to give you your ingredients and these other core facts that are regulated and required. But it could also be a branding opportunity, and how that interaction happens between scan and getting that information can be a sticky point. So it's absolutely an opportunity. But I'll also say, not to date myself here, but I remember when nutrition facts became the new federal requirement. Okay. And the great thing about the nutrition facts label is that it's the same pretty much on every single product. The consumer knows exactly where to look. Every single state knows exactly what they need to do. And so right now, what you're describing is the challenge with these multiple state operators that are all operating under different laws and having to constantly keep up with what needs to be on the label in one state versus the other. And then obviously, to Duane's point, when you get down to the retail level, that inconsistency in that label creates inventory management challenges, right? So whether it's the cannabis community coming together on its own and sort of preempting the federal law to say, look, we need to, as an association of sorts, come to a standard, or whether it's, hey, it's going to be like this until federal, the bottom line is, once we have a standard, I think a lot of this will take care of itself.
Okay, so I think we have time for about 2 more questions, but it looks like Abraham may have gotten some questions from possibly the medical cannabis community that we could touch on. So one, this has come up in our market specifically because of our shortage, our supply shortage. But someone is saying that one grower, or can you guys talk about when one grower is supplying other growers, and those secondary growers are relabeling the product as theirs? From a technology standpoint, how do you guys think they are doing that? If you have any knowledge with compliance, how are they doing that and staying in compliance as far as labeling and technology goes? If you have any thoughts about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not the expertise, of, this particular panel. I will say this. Where I've seen that done, most of the time you're purchasing a clone. And then, once you grow those clones and get the qualities that you want, at that point, it essentially, becomes yours. And, some of the ones that I've seen, if you go on to the grower site, then you are able to see that, in fact, they did get it. Some of the ones in the Pacific, Northwest, and, I really don't want to shout out any particular brands, but they do that, and they purchase, from Southern California, and then get the traits that they're looking for and do it that way. So, it gets into the hybrid cross-pollination and, Mendel's theories and all of that, which, that's not my area of expertise.
Duane, do you have a garden at home?
No, actually, I remember that from biology.
Okay. You sound like you dabble. I was just wondering.
No.
Okay. Second question. I'm sure you guys have heard about the smart devices. You kind of alluded to it already with the smart devices, but there's one from IESO, Illinois. They got it from EcoBuds and Boston Dynamics. That's the one where it's like a 4-legged dog looking thing, robot, and it scans for mold. How do you guys think it can be used for automation and technology compliance?
Well, I think everything's going to be automated eventually. So if you just think about the automation capabilities, and it really goes off of what Duane was talking about in these sort of mislabeling, misrepresenting situations. Another place where standards don't exist very well yet are the labs, right? So that lab is a quality assurance checkpoint. And so if the lab itself doesn't have the same standards across the markets, then you're going to have the same kind of problem. So my point is, I could see these automation opportunities going to the lab level as well, whether it's the walk around robot or if it's more like the Amazon robot, this ability to move things to and fro, move things into scanners, move things into testers on sort of this conveyor belt roll around automation robot system. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't expect that. And again, I'll say, look at Amazon as being the perfect example. 90% of that product that goes into those boxes that you get at home was brought to a human by a robot. And so once that was proven to the scale that it's been proven, we're seeing other industries get into these types of robots. And so I'm absolutely certain that as this industry grows and the sheer mass of it is going to require automation, and robotics will be a big part of that.
Yeah, to Stephen's point, I would tell whomever has that question to, do some research on vertical farming. Because more and more that's, what's starting to happen where, they're saying that the soil has been, overused. And so now they're using industrial buildings. And, when you look at it, especially, with some of the, attacks on migrant workers and things like that, you're now seeing where robots, to Stephen's point, and this is in regular agriculture, where, robots are the ones going out there picking the apples, picking the grapes, those sort of things, and packaging it. So, when it comes to that type of technology, I'm not an expert in it, but I would definitely tell them, take a look at vertical farming and hydroponics and, things like that, because, that's what's being predominantly utilized in this industry.
Okay.
All right. Unfortunately, we're running.
I was going to say, I got one more. This is my last one. Last one. COVID related, pandemic related. I'm sorry. It has to be relevant. How has your brand adapted to COVID with constant cleaning and disinfecting being top priority in the retail setting?
Yeah, I can take that first. We've kind of developed some new products in response to COVID. Shield barriers for the retail store, the checkout station, tamper-proof labels. That's been mostly popular in food industries, but we actually had one of our cannabis software partners kind of point out to us, with the increase in delivery, it could be really useful for packaging with them too. We're working on rolling out some other products, which I won't speak to yet. And, I hate to say it's kind of been a great year for us. We like to think of ourselves as kind of a future-proof company, creating these products that are going to last well into the future. And online ordering has been huge. Curbside pickup has been huge. Luckily, we were ahead of the curve with that in many industries, and cannabis kind of just followed suit. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken.
I'll make it quick for the sake of time. Anybody on the call, you can just Google right now, ELO, E-L-O, Access, A-C-C-E-S-S. And this is our COVID specific solution. This is for temperature taking. This can be at the front of the house upon customer check-in, but this can also be back of the house for employees and making sure that they're not infected. And oh, by the way, you can write that into your application and talk about how you're, complying on that level alone. Outside of that very specific solution, I'll just say touchscreens are your best friends with this. Standing face to face to someone is not the best interaction, and there's technology doesn't get you sick 9 times out of 10. But to add to that, it's all glass technology, so the cleanability is at the highest level. Squirt, wipe down, and you're done. And so that's how we're thinking through that, and we believe touchscreens are a COVID fighter. And I'll leave you with this. I went to Taco Bell the other day, and a woman walked in. She walked up to the cash desk, and the woman behind the cash desk said, "You have to use the kiosk." That is their COVID compliance move, is to make you use a kiosk. So think about that. It might be counterintuitive, but really touchscreens are a COVID fighter.
Yeah, and from a Zebra technology standpoint, I know some of the things that are being done are, utilizing mobile handheld computers for buy online, pick up in store, type solutions, things that were unheard of, prior to February and March when this happened. Never once did I envision a day where dispensaries might have a drive-through where you could just, pull in your car, or, somebody's walking the package out to you, those sort of things. So, the tablets, they even have healthcare variants if you really need, to deeply clean them, because which, I don't believe anyone, in this industry would need a healthcare variant, but, better safe than sorry. But they do have them that are utilized in hospitals, and, can really handle, industrial grade antiseptic or disinfectants and things like that. So, to both, Brianna and Stephen's point, a lot of it is being driven by, contactless, whether it's a barrier, plastic or glass or whatever in front of you just to keep people safe, or the kiosk. We were already seeing, increases in kiosks. When you look at McDonald's, Burger King, places like that, they were rolling them out, long before COVID. And, they were seeing a revenue increase because, believe it or not, a lot of people don't want to deal with people. And so, and that's not going to go away. NRF, the National Retail Federation, they were saying, I think somewhere around like 70+% of the people they survey said that, even when COVID is gone, they would still prefer a contactless alternative. So, and again, that's the value that, any three of the, any one of our three organizations bring, is, to be able to provide you with the best in class technology as well as solutions to make not only your customers, but your employees safe.
Well, the best thing about technology, as far as I'm concerned, is that it was able to bring you this great panel today. And everybody's safe and happy. Brianna, Stephen, Duane, thank you guys very much
for
Mark, doing this.
I don't know if you noticed it, but Brianna kind of put a plug in for her to come back on here when, she's talking about, there's some products that I really can't talk about right now, so I guess
she's good. She's good.
Months. When can you talk about it, Brianna?
She's good. She's good at what she does, because that definitely got me. I was like, what's she talking about?
What are you up to?
That's right. That's right. So thank you guys all very much. It was great to have you, and hopefully we will have some of you back as this world evolves every minute, it seems like. So stay healthy, be well, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you guys in a little bit for our next show. Talk soon.